Hi, folks, and welcome back to the Star Wars Library, where Star Wars is in print, and I'm very, very sorry for not posting a video last week. Man, this whole last week has been crazy. We are one of the many states that are coming out of our quarantine and going back to work, so with work picking up, it's been kind of a crazy time, so I apologize for not being on here. Honestly, folks, I am so excited that we're returning to some sense of normality, I guess. I'm ready to cut this hair down. I haven't had long hair since I was in high school, and I do not like it. I guess you could call it my quarantine hair. People like Matt Wilkins and Christopher Nelson can grow beards. Well, I guess I'm just growing the top of my head instead of from my face. But no, I'm excited to get this to go. And again, I'm sorry for not being on here that much this last week. So I'm gonna make it up to you, and I'm gonna get a lot more episodes out this week. So jumping back into where we were, we're going to be looking at two stories today from the newspaper strips. The first is Doom Mission, and it's by Archie Goodwin and Al Williamson. Now, it starts in the Rebel Storm trade paperback, the one that we've been going through constantly, and then it'll go into the next one, which is the Escape to Hoth trade paperback, and that'll be our last trade of the newspaper strip. So we're almost done. So, the story of this. Oh, and by the way, this is all by Archie Goodwin and Al Williamson, just as usual. And we are in 1983. So, the executor returns to Yavin, and General Dodonna's son, Varid, I call him Varad, he claims to have escaped this skirmish with this giant warship. But Luke thinks that he didn't, that he actually flew off in terror rather than courage. So Luke is very suspicious about this guy. So General Dodonna, for those that don't know, he is the guy who's giving the briefing in A New Hope when they're explaining how to destroy the Death Star in that movie. He's the guy who is talking and explaining and tells them to shoot a proton torpedo down the exhaust port on the Death Star. So Luke and Varad, they have a lot of beef in this story because of this doubt and all this. Um, so that's kind of going on in here. Luke and Varad are fighting, and and it ultimately goes into a draw. And this is where we then jump over into the Escape to Hoth trade paperback. Um, and so it starts here. Now, to my knowledge, this is probably the longest story too that we've seen in the newspaper strips. I could be wrong, but to my knowledge, I believe that this is the longest one that we've seen. So, anyways, they're fighting and all that, and it comes to a draw. And they actually work together to board. They're on like this two-seater assault craft or whatever, and they board the executor with the power gem that they can use to destroy ships, which we've talked about in a previous episode. But Varad actually ends up leaving Luke stranded on this planetoid thing, and he goes to make a deal with Darth Vader, basically to say, um, I'm willing to sell you this power gem in exchange for my life. So we're kind of seeing that maybe he wasn't exactly, um, being all heroic the last time. He was being a coward. This is, I guess, just buying into Luke's version of that. So he goes to make a deal with Vader, and Luke gets picked up by the Millennium Falcon. And Varad kind of has this last minute change of heart, and he makes the suicidal run on the Executor, on its shields, and it's damaged, and it gives time for the rebels to evacuate. Now, um, jumping over into the next story, we get to Race for Survival. So again, we're now just like where we we jumped over from the last story over to this one. We are now going to be staying in this until the end. So folks, we are almost done with the newspaper strips. That is crazy. It feels like we've been on this for a long time, but it's kind of crazy that we're almost done. So anyways, we jump over to the next story. So Admiral Griff is in charge of Jovan Station, but Vader and the Executor are basically coming, and he doesn't really want to be usurped by Vader. We seem to see this as kind of a common theme in a lot of these classic Star Wars strips, where these officers are trying to, I guess, one up Darth Vader. Um, But Vader's expecting this, okay? Because Vader, I mean, Vader's not dumb, right? He's expecting this, and he's basically saying, okay, I'm going to use Griff to basically use him to kidnap the rebels and get what I want, essentially. So we also see in this, right before the attack on Yavin 4, we see that Luke gets the rank of commander. Now, he does not become commander of Rogue Squadron. That's something that we really need to emphasize here. This is basically the commander title that we see him as, you know, as just being a leader in the rebellion. So, think about the beginning of Empire Strikes Back when they're looking for Luke and they're like, Commander Skywalker. They're referring to this commander title, not he being the commander of Rogue Squadron. That'll be a little bit later on in the Star Wars timeline. Again, this is still around 0 to 1 ABY. We're still right after New Hope in the classic Star Wars strips. So basically, so Luke gets that, and General Dodonna, he's very broken up about his son's death, and so basically he um, stays on the planet as the Empire attacks, and so Luke is able to escape, and he helps lead the rebels out of there. Dodonna is believed to be dead at this point, so he's crushed under the rubble, I believe. And so basically, then we get to Luke trying to lead the rebels out the of the system, and so they actually have to fly through this unstable star, and they're going through these solar flares right here. And so Luke is actually using the Force to detect when they can go through. Like when the beam or the star kind of holds back a bit, that's when you go. Um, so Griff pushes really hard to kind of, I guess, be the hero and to stop them. Um, and they end up crashing into the Executor. And both ships are damaged, but particularly the shields on that are damaged. So they can't really continue on with the assault, and the rebels escape. Um, so that's kind of the story here. Of course, Vader um, will get uh, his payback, I guess, um, on the rebels, and we'll see that a little bit later. He kind of messes with Griff throughout this whole story. So um, again, that's kind of the big deal. General Dodonna, who is a someone we saw in the films, is presumed to be dead. However, that is not the case. Now, for the longest time, again, this is 1983 that this story takes place in. This is 1983. Come to find, in the 90s, we see in the X-Wing novel The Kuratos Trap, which we will get to later on in our chronology. Great series, by the way. Can't wait to talk about this. But in The Kuratos Trap, we actually see that he is alive. He's been enslaved and captured for all this time. So eventually in this series, I think it's Izzard's Revenge is particularly when this event happens, but he actually does come back and will rejoin well, I guess it's the New Republic at that point. Um, but we see this here. Now again, publication order wise, we knew that he was alive because of Dark Empire, but again, we'll get to that eventually. But chronologically speaking, this is the next time that we see, if you're reading in chronological order, going through the Star Wars universe in chronological order, this is the next time you will see him. So these stories, Do Mission and Racers for Survival, all in this trade paperback here, Escape to Hoth, are these essential stories in Star Wars? I think yes. I think definitely for definitely the newspaper strips, but I think also for the overall Star Wars expanded universe. I think that you will see a lot of good stuff in here. You see the Rebels leave Yavin 4. You see a film character um, die, but again, if you're reading the X-Wing novels, which are probably very well known and I know they're very beloved, you'll see a very major character, or a film character at least, you get to see why everyone thought he was dead. So I think this is a great story. I think it's definitely worth your time. If you're going through classic Star Wars, do not skip this one. Make sure to check it out. And I would even say if you're not reading classic Star Wars, this also might be worth your time. I think it might be something that you'd be into. So I would suggest checking it out, and I would call this an essential read in our chronology. So folks, thank you so much for tuning in today. I will see you next time with another episode of the Star Wars Library.